to lesson 7 of unit 10. So, this is kind of the third part of our discussion on interactions among living things, right? How do the living organisms that live on our planet interact with one another, right? In our last lesson, we talked about competition, right? That competing for resources. And we also talked about predation, right? Organisms that consume other organisms for survival. But today we're addressing the essential question, which is what are the three types of symbiosis? So, symbiosis is another type of interaction among organisms. Okay. And in order to answer that question, what are the three types of symbiosis? We first need to understand what symbiosis is in the first place, right? So that leads us to our definition of symbiosis. So, what this is basically any relationship between organisms in which two species they live closely together and at least one of them is getting a benefit from the relationship, right? It wouldn't make sense for there to be any relationship at all if one of the organisms wasn't getting some kind of benefit, right? Be it food or protection or shelter, things of that nature. Okay, so again, there are three types of symbiosis. So please go ahead and fill in those notes as we go. The first kind, actually, here, the three main types. Okay, we have mutualism, which is the first kind. We have commensalism, which is the second, and parasitism, which is the third. Okay, so the first kind is mutualism. So, in some relationships, two species may depend on one another. Okay, so this is actually true of the acacia trees, which you can see an example of here, and stinging ants in South America. So what happens is these ants they nest only in the acacia trees, whose thorns that you can kind of see here, and they're on a thorn. These ants are on a thorn in that picture. Their thorns they discourage the predators of the ants, right? So that benefits the ants. The tree also gives the ants its food, right? The ants in turn they attack animals that approach the tree that could harm the tree, and they get rid of competing plants. They get those away from the base of the tree. Okay, so these two organisms, the tree and the ant, they are helping each other. They're both benefiting each other. And that is exactly what mutualism is. Okay, it's a relationship in which both of the species have a benefit. They're both getting an advantage from this relationship, right? They're better off together than they would be apart. Some more examples of this include the anemone and the clownfish. Okay. In return for having a safe and protective home in the anemone, the clownfish gives the anemone several important benefits, right? They clean the anemone, they provide it nutrients from waste, and they scare away some predatory fish, such as the butterfly fish. You can also take a look at a hummingbird and flowers and plants, right? The hummingbird gets its food, its nutrition from the plants, and in turn, the hummingbird pollinates the plants. So it allows the plants to spread and grow. Another cool one is actually this relationship, okay? So food that's stuck in the mouth of the crocodile could cause an infection, which is not good. But this plover bird, it actually picks clean the crocodile's teeth. So when the crocodile needs its mouth cleaned, it'll open it up and it'll wait for this bird to come help it clean it out. So those all three of those are examples of what we call mutualism, right? In the bottom, the plover is getting food and the crocodile is getting a clean mouth. The next one was or is commensalism. So you guys may have seen a bird build a nest in a tree, right? The bird, it gets a place to live while the tree, is unharmed, right? There's no damage, there's no negative impact to the tree from the nest being there. So this relationship is what we call commensalism. Okay? It's a relationship in which one species is going to benefit and the other one, it's really not helped, right? The tree is not, there's no advantage to the tree to have a bird there, but it's also not harmed by it either, right? So it's just kind of whatever to the tree. But the bird has a big advantage, right? It gets to, have a safe place to have its babies, right? This is commensalism. Okay. In nature, commensalism, it's not very common because two species are usually either helped or harmed a little by any interaction, right? It may not be a significant harm, but there could be some kind of harm or help either direction, right? So commensalism isn't super common, but it does exist, okay? Again, one species benefits, the other species is not helped or harmed. And finally, we have the last one, which was parasitism, right? So most of us can say that we have or have had, right, a dog or a cat at home. Many family pets get treated with medications to prevent flea bites, right? Without treatment, pets can suffer some severe health problems as a result of these bites, okay? These fleas are what we call parasites, and this is parasitism, okay? Parasitism is a relationship that involves one organism living with, on, or inside another organism. And the key here is that the parasite is harming the organism it lives on, okay? So, two more terms associated with this are parasite and host. Okay, so the parasite is the organism that benefits, it's the organism that lives in the other one, right? And then the host, that's the organism that the parasite lives in or on, right? So, in the dog example, the parasite was the flea and the host was the puppy, right? Here's some more examples. This is actually a really weird one. Okay, so these are fish. Inside these fish's mouths is a type of what we call isopod. So it's a type of crustacean, kind of like crabs. It's distantly related to them. So these isopods, they're called a louse. These isopods go into the fish's mouth and they start to grow. And they basically like eat the food that the fish would get. It prevents the fish from being able to eat. And so they are a serious fish parasite. Pretty gross. The next one is another example of parasitism. You might get grossed out, but that's okay. I think it's cool. Okay, so it's called leucochloridium, and it's a parasitic worm. Yes, these pulsating things right here are parasitic worms that invade a snail's eye stalks. And it's pulsating because it's trying to imitate a caterpillar. Why would it want to do that? Okay, it wants to do that because it wants to get eaten. So, what these worms do, they mind control this snail, poor defenseless snail. They mind control him to make him go out into the open where a hungry bird will hopefully come and pluck these worms out of its eyes. So, the worms actually breed in the bird's guts, right? The bird poops out the eggs, and then this whole cycle starts all over again. The snail comes, it eats the eggs grow inside the snail, they turn into these worms that are growing in the eye sockets. It's pretty wild, right? But this is a perfect example of parasitism. All right. So, again, this is a pretty short lesson, but just to recap, symbiosis was this other interaction. Remember last time or last lesson, we talked about competition and predation. The last interaction is symbiosis, and that is any relationship where two species, they're living closely together, and at least one of the species benefits from the relationship, right? That there's three main types. We have the mutualism, where both are benefiting from the relationship. We have commensalism, where one benefits and the other is not harmed in any way. It doesn't benefit or get harmed, right? And then the last one was parasitism, where one benefits and the other gets harmed in the process. All right. Hopefully, you guys filled out those notes and get those turned in when you're done. As always, I'm here for any questions or concerns that you may have, and I'll see you next lesson.